Welcome to Legal Innovation Spotlight, the podcast that brings you the latest advancements in legal tech and knowledge management. I'm Ted Theodoropoulos, and I connect with the industry's brightest minds to provide you with valuable insights and actionable takeaways. So sit back, relax, and let's dive in. Okay, great. Gentlemen, Patrick, David Rueff, I appreciate you guys joining me today. We're going to talk about the rise of innovation teams in legal. And, you know, the innovation / KM world has, there's some overlap there and some interesting nuance. And I think you guys are the perfect people to help us dissect this a little bit. So rather than me butchering what it is you guys do, I'm going to let you introduce yourselves. Patrick, when I think of KM, and I think when most people think of KM, you're one of the top 3 names that come to mind. So I'll just let you 45, 60 seconds, tell us a little bit about your background and your relationship with KM.
Yeah, thanks, Ted. Yeah, you think that because I have 2 little logos up here and, both say KM on there. But thanks. I'm a former practicing lawyer. That's my sort of start in the legal world. And when I got frustrated enough practicing, I decided to do something about it and pitched my then firm about creating a new role that I thought I invented, the concept of knowledge management. I quickly learned that it was just coincidental that I had some good ideas that have been kicking around there for at least a decade before I started doing it, maybe longer. But started to pitch some ideas and concepts at my firm about knowledge management, innovation, trying to basically help lawyers be better lawyers, both from the practice and business of law. And did that for that firm that was Gibbons Deldeo in the New York City area. And continued to do that at a few other firms, including Debevoise and Plimpton and Ogletree Deakins and Jackson Lewis, over about 20 years now in the KM and innovation area. And then about a year and a half ago, I decided to go out on my own and open up my own consulting company, InspireKM. And now I've gotten to work with a lot of great firms, including David's firm and other firms and in-house legal departments. And I like to work with legal tech companies as well. So it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. And likewise, David, when I think LPM, you're someone who has written and spoken on that topic extensively. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I started out in the technology industry. I worked for a computer hardware and software manufacturer for probably about 4 years, and then decided to go back to law school. Went to law school, came out like everybody else in the 90s, got it thrown into litigation. Technology was nowhere to be found. And so I thought that part of my life was, behind me. And as I started practicing and diversified my practice, I started realizing the importance that technology should be playing in the delivery of legal services. And then had an opportunity to, work on some very large projects where we couldn't have done them without the use of technology. That was in disaster recovery in response to Hurricane Katrina, Ike, Dolly, and then the Superstorm Sandy in New York. And then that kind of solidified in my mind that this was not something for just big projects. We actually could use this in our day-to-day as we delivered services for our clients. So I came back to the firm with this crazy idea that kind of like Patrick, that, hey, we ought to be integrating project management and the use of technology in our practice every single day. The firm, was very innovative thinking and said, let's see what you got, and allowed me to come up with a process that we vetted internally and then started to implement. That was our Baker Managed Legal Project Management solution. And then I'm sure, much like Patrick, once we started to have some success, they asked me to kind of change my role within the firm and really focus on that and help other lawyers adopt the same approaches. And then our team kind of evolved from there to absorb the pricing, the knowledge management, the research, as well as, the legal project management function.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit too about how you guys are structured at Baker Donelson, and Baker Donelson's a client of InfoDash, We're very thankful for your business. InspireKM or KM and I were sponsors for the new diamond sponsors for the new conference, which we're really excited about. It's a small world for sure. But why don't we start off with, maybe just setting the stage. So what kind of inspired this whole conversation? And, from an outsider, someone who's never worked in a law firm, I'm not an attorney, but I've sold into legal since 2008, so a little over 15 years. And I've seen a trend in the last 5 where innovation, I'm seeing it more and more. I know it's been around longer, but now I'd say I see as many CKIOs as I see CKOs. Patrick, the name of your conference is a great example. ArcKM moved out of New York. They're in Chicago now. You're kind of filling that void, and it's not just KM, it's KM and I. So from an outsider, when I look at the people involved in innovation teams, a lot of them are former KM. I see different, we do business primarily with AM law firms, and I see varying, sometimes you'll have innovation teams that roll up to a CKO. Sometimes they're completely separate. Sometimes you have KM functions that that roll up to a chief innovation officer. It's very confusing for an outsider to really understand, hey, are these really new processes and roles, or are we using innovation to look innovative when the work is similar or largely the same? As an outsider, I don't know. So that was the inspiration for the conversation today. So Patrick, why don't, since you're very closely aligned to the KM brand, like what does KM mean to you?
Sure. Well, I would say it's definitely evolved over the years. Like I said, when I got started, I thought I invented it because I hadn't even heard of it, But at the core, one of the cores of KM is about working more efficiently, right? And it's about capturing the collective wisdom. Knowledge management is an organizational discipline, right? It's not an individual discipline necessarily, although some people talk about personal KM, which is an interesting concept. But knowledge management is an organizational discipline whereby you're trying to leverage and capitalize on an organization's collective knowledge and experience, right? So instead of just relying on what you know and your experience, the documents you've created and what you've done, if you're at a large law firm like Baker Donelson, for example, several hundred lawyers and lots of different offices, you might not know what all of the lawyers and other legal professionals in your firm know. Right. At some point, it's impossible to know what everybody knows, or even to know what they have experience in, let alone in any detail. So the concept is, if you can somehow enable individuals to know more about what your colleagues and coworkers know and what their experience has been, and to be able to access the content that they've created, then you can leverage that for new business. You can leverage that to bring on a new person into your team, to help a new client, et cetera, et cetera. So it's the sharing and leveraging of knowledge and content and experience among an organization for the purposes of better serving your client, being more efficient, increasing the revenues and profitability of the firm. So that's sort of now you could go really deep and you could talk about a lot of different facets of knowledge management, and I'm sure we'll get into some of them, but that's sort of the foundation, I would say, of what I like to think about when I think about knowledge management. And the way I think we do that is through connecting ourselves with our colleagues and our coworkers, and connecting ourselves with the content that those folks create. I don't know, David, do you have a sort of similar or expansive view of that?
Yeah, and how contrast it, David, if you would, on your definition of innovation. Like, there's overlap, right? The Venn diagram is not mutually exclusive, but what's the complement look like in the innovation space?
I mean, I think Patrick really hit on it. When we think of innovation at Baker Donelson, and I think this is consistent with what we see our clients wanting and what other firms are doing, it's really about disrupting the status quo. We're all we get into the habit of doing things, and it's like we do it the same way over and over and over again. We're not really looking at improving the way we deliver the services. And it's to me, innovation is proactively looking for new ways to reduce the friction that we may have with clients, or the friction that we may have with a team, to automate, our processes, and then also to look at new technologies that could help us, be more efficient, and also deliver better quality, more value, to the client. And so, KM is a piece of that, right? There are, when we go in and we work with a team at Baker Donelson to look at ways that we can improve how they deliver their services to a client, KM, or a knowledge management solution, may be what comes out of that, but it may also be other things that are not necessarily within that, compartment of what we call knowledge management. And I think that having that broader perspective of what the KM is a solution. That's kind of how I look at it. I don't look at it as a function, a function within a law firm. I look at it as a process and a solution that we can deliver as part of our innovation suite.
Yeah, that's a lot of what, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's a lot of what Dave and I have talked about over the months and quite frankly years. We've known each other for a long, long time. But and we've had some deep conversations, like, several hours long at times. And boy, it always seems to come down to solutions, right? What problem are you trying to solve? Now, there's obviously different types of problems and different ways to solve problems. But with both knowledge management and innovation, I think most of the time it always comes down to, what solutions can we offer to our lawyers and our colleagues. And it's probably why you call your department Client Solutions Group, right? Because that's really what it's, at the end of the day, what it's all about. And, just on the innovation front, and you sort of mentioned earlier, Ted, is it just sort of a buzzword? I'm not sure if you use the term buzzword, but is it just, hype and a buzzword, that type of thing? And I think, unfortunately, for some organizations, it is, and they're just trying to, everyone's talking about innovation now, so we want to seem innovative. For the firms that are really walking the talk, it's not just a buzzword. It's really about finding those solutions. And at the end of the day, innovation means, if you look it up in the dictionary, it means doing something new or doing something in a new way, right? Presumably to advance the business that you're in. But I always used to sort of come up with this sort of mantra that innovation is focused and deliberate problem solving, right? And I like to say it like that because some companies and firms, unlike David's, need to understand that the focus and the deliberation are very, very important. You can't just name someone a chief innovation officer and think now our problems are solved because we have someone with an innovation title. You have to be focused and you have to understand what you're trying to do and be very focused about the problems you're trying to solve, be very deliberate about it. So that's my mantra for innovation. It's focused and deliberate problem solving, to sort of pick up on what David was talking about.
And, I'll add this too, Ted. So one of the reasons that I wanted to work with Patrick on our KM strategy was because I wanted to throw the mold out. I wanted to look at a new way of approaching this, because what at least, what I had seen is that KM had kind of evolved to be this one size fits all approach for every kind of practice, every kind of attorney, and delivering that kind of one size fits all content through, a centralized resource, right? And what we wanted to do is throw that out, and let's look at every practice and let's try to identify what's going to be most valuable knowledge to them, and then how do we manage that? And I knew that, with Patrick's experience and that he was the best person for us to collaborate with to try to disrupt that historical definition of what KM was and rethink it, and then deploy something that was going to be much more valuable inside the firm for our attorneys and our clients, with that goal of, being more efficient, providing more value.
Yeah.
Irrespective of title is one thing I think that we talked about, David. And the other thing, just to, I suppose, close the loop, is, one thing we said to David's point is nothing is sacred, right? Just because we've done it before, just because we have these titles, just because we have these roles and we've done this, we're going to question everything. Nothing is safe from critical analysis and asking, should we be doing this? Should we be doing something else? Let's look at it with fresh eyes, which is fantastic. I think every firm should do that, because you get caught in a rut. You think you're doing the right thing, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I think David and his team are really good at being open-minded about that.
So you mentioned, chief innovation officers, chief knowledge officers. Like I've seen organizations that have both. I think more commonly what I see in the AmLaw space is CKIOs, but it's still it's a moving target. Things are still. I don't think the dust has settled on the ideal reporting structure. I've seen innovation, like I said earlier, report up to KM. I've seen them separate. Like Patrick, especially given your cross-sectional view, you've consulted at many different firms. Like, how do the reporting structures differ? Like, is innovation, in your experience, a independent, org reporting structure that has visibility at the EC level? How does KM and innovation, their reporting structures, differ from what you've seen?
Yeah, I quite frankly, I wish that I could say there's one model, because it would be helpful for all of us. And by the way, the legal tech companies I've consulted for all ask that same question. And to your point, they're trying to figure out who do I speak with about this, that, or the other thing. And it's very, very difficult. And it's not just limited to knowledge titles or innovation titles. Now there's value, right? And is another one, chief of client value officer. There's all practice innovation. There's lots of different titles. They're sort of all over the place now. But knowledge and innovation, I would say, at least in our circles, are probably the most common titles. And to your point, sometimes it's a combination title, like Evan Shankman over at Fisher Phillips and Oz Benamram at Simpson Thacher. They both have that Chief Knowledge and Innovation Officer title. And then you've got firms, so for example, in my experience at the last couple of firms I've worked at Ogletree, my title is Chief Knowledge Officer, but innovation was part of that. It was sort of an implied part. So, we had innovation groups with clients. We had what we called an R&D council internally, which is another name for innovation in some respects. So it really runs the gamut. And then at Jackson Lewis, I was Chief Innovation Officer, and knowledge management was under that umbrella, right? So even in my career, I've had different titles and different organizational structures. Some firms I know have separate Chief Knowledge Officer and separate Chief Innovation Officer, which I suppose that's fine. It depends on the organization, right? I would say as long as they work very, very closely together, that's imperative, I think. I think it's very, very important. First of all, I think it's very important for all administrative departments to work closely together, but especially a knowledge management and an innovation leader at the same firm should be basically talking every single day and working very, very closely together. So it really runs the gamut. It depends on where you are. Unfortunately, there's no standard in our industry at the moment.
And I know Baker has a CEO, but from an outsider, when I look at the AmLaw list, so at the top of the AmLaw list, you're mid-single digit billions, right? Just outside of the Fortune 500. I forget what the floor is in the Fortune 500, but I think it's like 7-8 billion revenue. So, there's not a single Fortune 500 company that doesn't have a CEO that I'm aware of. I would find that highly unusual, but in the law firm world, it's very common. Why are there not more CEOs, especially, I mean, we talked about last time the three of us chatted about this, it was like, okay, and the CEOs that are there, did they get there because they're the best at lawyering? Or, do they have the business credentials to understand, things like capital structures, other than just from a legal perspective, or go-to-market strategies, all of those sorts of things that a CEO coming up the ranks learns along the way that coming up the legal ranks wouldn't learn. I mean, business school and law school are very different, right? I got an MBA. You guys both have JDs. I'm certain that our curriculums were vastly different. With a little bit of overlap, we, as an intro, I mean, one of the 101 MBA courses is business law, but in general, the training is very different. So why do we not see more CEOs in legal, David?
I can only speak from, my experience at Baker Donelson, really, Ted. And I think, I'll be honest with you, I've been here for over 20 years and we've always had a CEO. We've had a COO. We've had a CFO. We've been structured very much like a corporation. Now, the staffing of those positions is a lot different than what you would see on the corporate side. And I think it's a combination of, think about, your law firm is composed of a bunch of autonomous service providers. So your leadership structure, even though it's modeled after the corporate, the expertise required to serve in that role is a little bit different because you're governing all these autonomous service providers. And so what I've seen, the leadership, our current CEO and the ones that were his predecessors, they had a unique combination of, having an established reputation as a great business developer, high revenue generating attorney, leadership skills, able to, rally support around an initiative. And then, also just being somebody that the organization trusted to lead us, on a defined strategic plan. I will say that in the past 3 years, so our team was created in 2019, and our current CEO, Tim Lupinacci, was also came in, to his position in 2019, and he basically kind of took the CEO position and the strategic direction of our firm in a much closer direction to our corporate counterparts. He wanted our firm to be run as a best run business. And he felt like innovation was a key component of being run like a best run business. And so that's why there was the creation of our team. And I can get into more details, kind of why we did what we did and all that. But I think at the end of the day, it was about, he saw our corporate counterparts having a high focus on innovation, but not window dressing, actually investing in the function. And he wanted to make sure that was a key component of, our structure. Now, why do other firms don't do that? I can speak from, just having worked with colleagues. And I think it's just because, they are, it really depends on the practices, the industry served, in ours, we have a broad range of services that we provide, a broad range of practice areas. So, I think that there's probably something to, being in a segmented or a single industry, and then the leaders of that, single industry, they don't, it's basically providing legal services is pretty much all they do in a particular area. So there's not as much of a need for this kind of corporate organization like we do. I mean, we have so many practice areas, so many different types of clients. I think that corporate organization is more necessary. Patrick, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And, it does depend on the firm and the individuals at the firm. Some lawyers also have, business degrees. It's one of the things I remember when I was in law school, a couple of folks were getting that dual degree going across the quad to the business school. And I kind of, in retrospect, thought, wow, that was a good idea. Maybe I should have done that. So there's clearly some lawyers who have business savvy or have actual, experience running organizations. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that it's oftentimes the best lawyer or the great lawyers at a firm become the great business leaders at a firm. So although I think generally speaking, Baker Donelson's model is fantastic, right? Because law firms are businesses. Lawyers don't like to say that out loud a lot of times, right? We're a profession, right? We're more artists than salespeople. We're more technicians than other things, right? But at the end of the day, we're professionals, and we provide client service. We're not a business. We're not. I mean, at the end of the day, they'll acknowledge. Most lawyers will acknowledge that we're a business, and we all publish all the firms publish their profits for partner and all that stuff because they want to rank and everything. But at the end of the day, it's important that whoever's leading the firm be focused, right? And that's why, at least at the firms that I've been associated with, the practicing lawyer that becomes the managing partner or whatever they call the leader, usually not a CEO, but the head lawyer will usually take some sort of break from any type of practice, right? And they will run the firm day to day, administratively, et cetera, et cetera. And then oftentimes when their term is over, they'll go back into the practice and reestablish their practice, which has to be a little awkward and probably difficult. But there's many ways to skin the cat, so to speak. But it seems to me that the smartest and most business savvy firms are doing it just the way that Baker Donelson are doing it.
Yeah. I had lunch with a law firm CEO, smaller law firm, a little under 200 attorneys. Had lunch with him on Monday or Tuesday, and learned a lot just about what's his day look like. So he actually runs the most profitable and revenue generating practice in the firm. And so he still has responsibilities outside the CEO function, which I thought was super interesting, right? Because like you said a minute ago, a lot of times they'll step away, and that makes sense. But if it's kind of hard to step away when that's your biggest profit center, right? And for the firm, that could mean taking a step back. But it would seem to me it would become a little bit of a tug of war in terms of time commitment. Hey, am I spending my time looking at big picture, charting our 3-year vision, our long-term planning, or am I spending my time generating revenue and profit for the firm? That's got to be tough to balance as a law firm CEO. At Baker, is your CEO removed from the practice, or is he wearing both hats?
So it's interesting. His story is very similar to the gentleman that you had lunch with. So he was the practice or department head for what was a very profitable, lucrative practice for the firm. And as a result of that, had served in various leadership roles, board of directors, special committees, that kind of thing. And then, he was elected as our CEO, and he had and has a thriving practice. He has a number of clients that he still supports, but he's got teams basically that are doing the day to day. So he still has to have a hand in that. But he's, I think one of the reasons you want your CEO to step away is you want them focused. I mean, I know Patrick had to deal with this. I did too. When you start to veer into these administrative roles and you've got a foot in both sides, it is extremely challenging to manage your responsibilities on the administrative side and still manage clients, because you can't control when an emergency is going to pop up, and they may pop up at the same time, and you're only human, and there's only so many hours in the day. And so you want your CEO to be 100% focused, because especially with a large firm, a lot of different practice areas, there's a lot of areas that they have to manage and direct and help coach. And so I think he's had some some really good, I guess, sergeants who are actually out there helping to maintain those clients and keep that revenue going. And I have seen lawyers that have migrated out of those roles and come back. Our former CEO is actually still here. And he served in that role for a number of years and then rotated back to practice. And he had maintained his practice experience as well as his relationships and was able to kind of, make that into a smooth transition. But it is difficult. I'll say that.
Yeah, it seems like there would be some competing priorities there for sure. And as the CEO, you're supposed to be, I forget which quadrant, Stephen Covey numbered them, but it's the important but not urgent stuff that you're working on, right? It's your long-term planning, your strategy, and the business of practicing law, or just even closing deals. Like if you're involved in, like the CEO that I had lunch with, he has a similar, I guess, setup. And so, he kind of works with clients. His practice does transactional work. So they get a big deal in the hopper. He helps kind of bring it home, doesn't bill hours, but, it's if those are very important and urgent matters, right? It's the important but not urgent matters that tend to get neglected, which is the planning piece of it. So it's an interesting balance for sure. And
I'll give you this kind of perspective on the important, not urgent. It's funny because that's typically what you think of strategy, right? But we had a meeting yesterday of all our firm leadership and with our CEO. And the whole point was to evaluate our strategic plan and understand all the changes that are impacting us. So it's like what used to, you could do a strategic plan and kind of go with that. And we, but there's so many influences now, the economic climate, new technologies, client, changes, all of that. You've got to continuously evaluate that strategy and pivot. And so, we have these regular meetings with our CEO where he's trying to get feedback from all of the leaders in my department and others to kind of understand what we're seeing so that we can make sure we're pivoting that strategy and staying on, our course. You can't just plug it in and hope it succeeds.
Yeah, I mean, there's always curveball. Look at ChatGPT. Like prior to ChatGPT, AI there was always discussion of AI, but now I get questions when we have sales conversations. I get questions. Some of them are silly, but it's just like, hey, what's your plan to incorporate it? And I know what's driving it is because somebody up in the C-suite is saying we need to adopt AI, and so then the questions come down regardless of whether or not they make sense. And we are already doing some things along those lines, but that was a curveball. ChatGPT 100 million users in under a month.
Oh yeah.
And now it's all over everybody's feed. We all have AI fatigue, I think. I know I do. But it's that's an example, I think, of where you have a strategic plan and overnight, for the most part, you're going back and revising it to incorporate what just happened.
Right.
Well, why don't we talk more about the org structure at Baker Donelson? You guys have an interesting org structure, and Patrick has worked closely with you. I know he's a fan of it. So you're head of client solutions, right? Correct? And you report directly to the CEO.
Correct. Yep.
And tell me about like what's in scope for how big's the organization, whatever you're comfortable talking about. What's in scope in terms of function? How big's the organization? Are you guys geographically distributed? Are you all there in Nashville?
No, so we have a team of about 22 people. Our scope of services includes, legal project management, knowledge management, pricing, research, legal practice technologies, and the firm intranet where we're deploying the InfoDash solution. And we've got a broad range of skill sets on the team. We have what I call legal process engineers. I think that's a term that somewhat unique to Baker. We also have data analysts, pricing professionals, research analysts, technologists that do both administration as well as development. And then, just some analytics professionals that help us with a reporting function out of all of those areas. Geographically, we're spread across the firm. We have resources in pretty much all of our offices across our footprint. That's really good because it gives us boots on the ground visibility with attorneys and other practitioners. And it's been really good at helping us kind of get the word out about our group. And the primary reason we did this was because as you mentioned earlier, I led our LPM function for several years, at our LPM and pricing function, and that included process improvement. And what we were finding was that we also had a research function, a knowledge management function, and what we were finding is what ends up happening inside a law firm is they create these teams, and then they kind of evolve organically as projects come in, and the scope kind of floats with the projects that they work. And so you get a little bit of overlap in some cases. Reporting structures may be different. Strategic planning and budgeting may go through different channels. And so we had a lot of disconnection between those different groups. And in addition to our confusion about, am I budgeting for this? Are you budgeting for that? What's your strat? All that. You also had attorneys with confusion. Like, they're not knee deep in this stuff every day. So what's KM? What's LP? They don't know. They just got a problem they need fixed. And so we wanted to create a team that was very easy for them to access. And they didn't have to worry about what the issue was. Is it a KM thing, a research thing, whatever? They just came to us, and we were their in-house consultants to help them diagnose, triage what the need was, and get them more quickly to a solution that we could implement. And the reason we chose, I did a lot of thought about this. I actually went out and researched what other firms were doing, the different types of groups they kind of like we're talking about here. It was all over the board. It was crazy how many different, structures were there. Because we wanted to make sure that we captured the essence of this team in the name of the groups to externally and internally. And I thought about, KM, innovation, legal ops. There were a lot of firms that were, forming legal ops functions. And where we landed was our function, the operations is spread across a lot of different groups at Baker Donelson. We don't own all of that. We own some of it, but not all of it. But our primary focus is trying to identify ways for our lawyers to integrate new process, new technology, add more value. And that's why we focused on solutions, client solutions. And we work, again, both internally with our attorneys and with clients directly with them.
And those are what you refer to as LPs, right?
That's right. Those are our, so we created this role, legal process engineer. They are responsible for pricing, technology implementation, budgeting, research, solutions with our different departments. And what I had learned in implementing these at the beginning was that just like we're doing with Patrick and KM, the needs of a department or a practice group are very unique, driven by the type of practice and driven by the type of client that they serve. We wanted specialists who were very aware of that and who were working with them every day on different types of solutions so that they would be better subject matter experts in what would be, the best solution for a project. So we have them divided up based upon our practice departments.
So are these JDs, are these technologists, what is the typical resume look like? Are they Lean Six Sigma trained? Like what do they look like?
That's the hard part. They're all of the above. And I hate to even talk about them because I don't want them to get, poached by another law firm.
Don't name names.
That's right. But, it really depends on the individual, Ted. It's a very special person. They've got to be a consultative type, person, the expertise, usually look for a JD with technology proficiency. They got to be good at Excel, from a reporting and pricing standpoint. I had a project way back, and that's what drove this whole discussion, where we were working with a team that was struggling with their pricing, struggling with their delivery process. And we basically just took the whole thing apart, re-engineered how they did their pricing, re-engineered how they delivered their services, identified opportunities for technology. And I was amazed at how valuable it was to understand the pricing when you were looking at the technology solution for the team and looking at how to structure the team. All of that kind of ties together. And that's what made me realize that, asking our attorneys to go over here and price a number, and then over here we're executing on that number, that's a wrong approach, at least for us. And so that's why we wanted to bring this together. And so we've got these very special and incredible resources at Baker Donelson who serve in these roles and can really kind of look at that full continuum and work with our lawyers and see kind of where everything's going to go. I'm pricing for you now, but I know where this is going to go. We've got to develop and implement some technologies that are going to drive, this pricing approach.
Sounds like a unicorn. Like I can't imagine what the job rec looks like. What does it look like? Or do you guys recruit internally? There's intangibles that you say, you know what, this person has it. The it factor, competencies across all those different, because when I think lawyers in Excel, that's not, those are not usually between the same ears.
So it's usually looking for a lawyer who's also a good project manager, and we get them certified as a project manager, and that lays the foundation. And then, working with technology, working with different pricing approaches, that's just based on experience. It's really hard to go get that training. Essentially, you got to live it. We've been fortunate to have team members that have been with us 10 years or more. And so, I haven't had to do as much recruiting but I know that we all know that if we had to go out there and find a resource, we'd probably have to coach them, build them for these types of roles. But I think it does. It also, I have felt that it's a challenge for the individual, because they have a much broader scope than they would see anywhere else at another firm. Makes them a much better professional because they get to engage with all these different areas.
Yeah, Patrick, what,
yeah,
I think was it Littler that has the knowledge desk? What have you seen at other firms? Is this unique, or this approach of having, I guess it's kind of a single point of almost like a concierge kind of service? Yeah. Have you seen that in other places?
Yeah, Littler, Scott Reckshoff, and he's the CKO over at Littler. Long time, I think he's a partner there, lawyer. I think he's still a partner there, if I recall. And he's the CKO, and that's his full-time gig. And they came up with this concept, right? It's, I don't know it intimately, but I've seen him present on it, and he'll be at the conference and talking a little bit about it. Not necessarily this, but a lot of other things, building sort of KM into the everyday workflow and sort of what we do as a firm. But yeah, so they I don't know if they would say that they've modeled their knowledge desk around the sort of IT help desk, but in my view, it's similar in that respect, right? To David's point, lawyers often don't know, do I contact my LPE or my DOD or this person or that person? They shouldn't really need to remember that, in my opinion, right? There should be one channel for them to reach out. And, one of the mantras that I learned from David's organization, your problem is my problem, right? And I love that. I think, I won't say names. I think one of David's colleagues mentioned this, your problem is our problem. And it's a very good mantra, because I don't know the answer, but I'll find out who knows the answer, or I know the answer and I can help you, or that's this person. Whatever it is, we'll find out the answer for you. And I think that's a person. It's not a personality trait, but it's sort of a personality trait, right? to your question earlier about how do you find these people, right? Do they really exist? Are they unicorns? I think they are kind of unicorny, but when you find them, you know them, right? And I've had great experiences personally at various firms where it's kind of like a virtuous cycle too. When you start doing this and you start putting that out there, certain folks come out of the woodwork. If internally, I've had this happen at a couple of firms where we're doing this stuff, we're providing this service. You provide this service to some of the lawyers, and one of the lawyers might come to you and say, "Hey, I really like what you're doing, and I'd love to do that myself. I really, I'm tech savvy, I'm service oriented. I know this area of the law, obviously, because I'm practicing in it, and I think I'd be good at that position." So that's happened a lot in organizations that I've been associated with. And I'll tell you, some fantastic people come out of the woodwork when they see that they can marry all of what they like to do in this sort of service-oriented, solution-oriented approach, and they thrive. And Evan Schenkman, Flynn Flett, I could name tons of names that have gone off to other firms. Stephanie Gudos, who used to be at Jackson Lewis, now is at Gunderson Detmer. Fantastic folks who just get it, and it's that special combination. And David's very fortunate to have a great team of those folks too. Again, no names, right?
What drives? Is it the nature of the work? I would think as an attorney, practicing attorney, just the earning potential would be higher. That it would be. I would think, and somebody would be able to leverage if they did have a JD. Is it more balance? Like, what's the draw? Is it just the enjoying what you're doing? I know a lot of lawyers don't enjoy practicing law. It is for whatever reason. Obviously there's a lot of stress and pressure, and you're on call. But like, what's the draw, David, to get them out of, if they are a practicing attorney, into this role?
Gosh, Ted, I've never thought about that, but I think it's having a broader range of interests than just practicing law. The individuals on our team really enjoy process, really enjoy trying to solve a problem, not a legal problem, but a delivery problem. They love working with clients. They love, being a partner with that practicing attorney to say, let's provide some value for this client that really creates some stickiness for the law firm and makes that client not want to go anywhere. And we're seeing more of that. I mean, these types of services and roles that we provide with our team, it's a big differentiator when we go and talk to a client, because, rarely do they encounter a law firm that has a specialist who's dedicated to the delivery process for that client, and efficiency and pricing and technology and all the things that they're being challenged to make sure their outside counsel are doing. They're getting those internal pressures. Our outside counsel need to be doing all these different things and be innovative. And we've got a resource right there partnered with our attorney who's helping to make sure that we're checking that box. And so I think it's just if I did a cross section of the resources on our team, they all came out of law school. They practiced for a little bit, but then they liked process. They liked the project management component. They liked, again, just being a consultant for our lawyers and clients.
Sounds like OnStar, OnStar for attorneys. Well, so looking at the future of innovation, right? We talked about how it has evolved and gotten to where it is today. What is it? Obviously, right now, if I were just to put myself in the shoes of a chief innovation officer or a CKIO, I would think that AI would be a big focus in understanding it and its value, but there's obviously going to be a lot more than just that. Like, what does the future of this look like, Patrick? Is KM in danger, of being overshadowed by innovation? Or, I would think not, but what's your take on where innovation is going in relation to KM?
Yeah, I think, again, back to one of the first sort of concepts that we talked about, there's a lot of overlap depending on how you've structured your organization. What you might realize, it's funny, back when I first started, I realized that and I said this, of course, in jest, if I do my job right, I will KM myself out of a job. And what I meant by that was, if I did my job right, then we would no longer need a cheerleader, someone to promote the concepts of KM, because it would be baked into the standard operating procedures of what we do every day. I think the same is true of innovation, right? We would keep an innovative mindset, keep the ideas about how do we do things better, not resting on our laurels, right? Is there room for new ideas, new ways to do things? So I think in many ways, this stuff's not going away. It's going to evolve. And I think it has evolved over the years, right? We think about the early days of knowledge management. You really just focused on, precedent documents, models, samples, forms. And back when I started, a lot of those things were still in file cabinets, right? Not virtual file cabinets, but actual file cabinets. They started to transition, but it evolved over the years into not just the content, not just the what or the who, but the how, right? So I always say, as I mentioned before, it's about connections, right? Connecting with our clients and coworkers, connecting with our content, and then the other component of this is how we make those connections, right? Because at the end of the day, if we can't make those connections in a meaningful way, then it's useless. You might as well not have those contacts, and you might as well not have that content. So how do you do it? You need tools, you need search engines, you need intranets, for example. You need easy ways to find stuff, to locate stuff. That is one of the biggest challenges, I think. So, these things are not going away. And the challenges and the problems to solve are evolving all the time. Your comment about AI, there's an intense focus on AI right now. We've all been in the industry long enough to remember another recent wave with IBM Watson. Remember when that came out? Everyone was like, "Oh, we got to get this, and let's do AI." You probably all have too. I remember meeting with the folks at IBM, and they said, "Great, we'd love to work with you. What do you want it to do?" And we're like, "We want it to, do the thing that it did for Jeopardy and just answer all our questions immediately." Well, we get a little more specific than that. It doesn't work that way. And I'm finding the same is true with generative AI, right? We have to figure out what we want it to do. So innovation and knowledge management, I don't see it as something that has an end, but it's sort of an evolutionary journey, I think, in many ways, because the problems don't stop, right? The problems to be solved will continue to come at us, and using innovative techniques and knowledge management techniques will help us do that, I think, in many ways.
That makes sense. And I know we're running out of time here. Patrick, you're hosting a conference in New York City in October. We're certainly going to be there. We can continue this sort of dialogue, and I'm sure there will be conversations very similar to this. So hope everybody can make that. Now, I know you're going to ILTACon. David, are you going to make it to ILTACon?
No, we got about 4 of our team members that are going to be there, though, but I'm planning on being at Patrick's conference.
Okay, good. Well, listen, I really appreciate you guys spending some time with us today. I think it was a great conversation. It certainly has helped me as an outsider get a lay of the land a little bit better. And I appreciate you both sharing, David sharing details about your organization, and Patrick sharing your insights.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it. That was fun.
Thank you.
Here, guys. Thanks for listening to Legal Innovation Spotlight. If you found value in this chat, hit the subscribe button to be notified when we release new episodes. We'd also really appreciate it if you could take a moment to rate us and leave us a review wherever you're listening right now. Your feedback helps us provide you with top-notch content. Want to dive deeper into the world of legal innovation? Connect with us online at getinfo-.com, where you'll find additional resources and articles. You can also follow us on social media at getinfo- to stay updated on the latest news and insights in the field of legal tech and knowledge management. Once again, thank you for joining us today on Legal Innovation Spotlight, a fireside chat series hosted by InfoDash.